Okay, Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue. Essentially, this gives you a perspective on the entire evolution of the American horror film franchise. You know, starting from some of the really early ones where it was more of, you know, mythological creatures and stories of that style, going into where you had more of the space sort of movies, where you had aliens, other sorts of monsters, the transitioning back to what we consider now to be the classic Universal style horror movies. Also going into slashers, and some very unique perspectives on how certain movies were done. You know, John Carpenter's bits and pieces were actually probably some of the best. He talks about how it used to be is, you know, some would say the evil, you know, horrifying things, they're out there. Like it's a camp time story. We're sitting here in the camp, he's telling a story about some sort of creature that lives outside. The enemies and the villains are those not within our group, they're up there, they're somebody else. When he said that, you know, normally the most impressive, most horrifying things, it's not the enemies that are out there, it's the enemies that are here. You know, the most amount of evil and the most amount of horrifying things actually happen, you know, that we do to other humans. So that's kind of interesting, as well as his background on the They Live movies. The They Live movie. You get some fantastic clips from different movies, as well as getting to see how they promote movies differently. You know, have you never been? I didn't really say that much about the Howling when it first came out, but then hearing we were really making sure that it wasn't about werewolves. That you went to go see the Howling, not knowing it's about werewolves. So you would go, oh, it's just cheese. We've seen werewolves 1,000 times. This piece is what Hitchcock did, and if you can read about how he originally did Psycho. You know, the original Psycho, now it seems kind of tame. But if you read the history behind it, it's an absolutely fascinating movie. And that gives a really great perspective on, essentially, here's what American horror movies have gone from, here's where they are today. And you actually do see every couple of years a recycling of themes, which I found pretty interesting. You know, I've watched horror movies probably closer to 30 years, beyond seeing the old classics. And you do see after a time, you know, you see like the rise of slasher films, them declining, then coming back, the rise of the monster movies, them going away, then coming back. It's a very interesting documentary. If you're a horror fan, I definitely recommend picking it up. You probably don't need to buy it unless you want to watch it several times to get, you know, a greater level of detail. Something you could probably easily rent.